Hello, my daring viewers. Before the terror begins, I've got one request. Hit the like and subscribe button and share this video. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and let me know what you think of the story. Let's get started. This took place a few years ago on Halloween night. A friend of mine and I had made plans to walk around the neighborhood and go trick-or-treating like most kids our age. We were both 12 then, still young enough that it was not strange to go door to door for candy, but old enough that our parents finally let us go on our own. I remember being especially excited because it was our first time doing it, without any adults tagging along. It meant we could plan our own route and hit all the houses that usually gave out the best stuff. The night went on as most Halloweens do. We had our bags about halfway filled when it started to get pretty late. I think it was close to 9 p.m., the time when people began switching off their porch lights to show they were done handing out candy. My friend suggested we should probably start heading back, but I was being stubborn and wanted to squeeze in a few more houses. After a bit of back and forth, we decided we would go through one last cul-de-sac before calling it a night. Our neighborhood was nice, but for some reason it did not have many street lights, and since most of the houses had already turned off their lights, it was getting harder to see as we walked. Then, almost out of nowhere, we noticed a figure coming toward us. It was not another group of trick-or-treaters. It looked like a grown man walking alone. As he got closer, we saw he was wearing a police uniform. He greeted us when we passed and introduced himself. Then he pointed toward a house farther down the road. He told us there was an older man who lived there, and that he had been trying to lure trick-or-treaters inside his home. He said someone had reported it to the police, and that is why he was there investigating. During our short exchange, he kept mentioning that his patrol car was just over there, and each time he pointed vaguely toward some random direction. Even as 12-year-olds, something about the whole interaction felt strange. But then he said something that left both of us frozen. He told us he needed to talk to the man, but that the guy would not open the door if he saw a police officer outside. So according to him, he needed us to go knock instead. He said if we did that, the man would probably answer the door, and once the man tried to invite us in, the officer would jump out from behind the bushes and catch him in the act. My friend and I just stared at each other, completely confused. To understand how absurd this was, you have to realize what he was asking. This supposed cop wanted two 12-year-old kids to walk up to the house of a man, reportedly trying to lure children inside and use us as bait. Neither of us said anything for a while. I wanted to tell him no, but the words just would not come out. Then before we could respond, a big group of older teens came around the corner walking toward us. That is when the officer quickly said he would be right back and told us not to move. He walked off in some random direction and disappeared into the dark. When the group of teens got closer, one of them asked if we knew that man. We said no and explained what had just happened. They all looked uneasy and agreed that the situation sounded really weird. They offered to walk us home, and we did not hesitate to accept. That was the end of it for the night. My friend and I never really told anyone about the incident at the time, but as the years passed, I started to regret not saying anything or reporting it to the actual police. To this day, we still do not know whether that man was really an officer or not. The older I get, the more I doubt it. And honestly, even if he was asking two kids to do something that dangerous is completely unacceptable for anyone, let alone a police officer. Whoever that man really was, I still think about what his real intentions might have been, and that thought continues to bother me. This happened a few years ago when I was 14. It took place on Halloween night. One of my friends and I had made plans to go trick-or-treating together. Looking back, I know 14 is a little old to still be doing that, but at the time we both figured we had one more year left before it started to seem weird. We lived in a really nice neighborhood though, that also meant every house sat on a big lot, about an acre between each one. So walking from door to door took a few minutes each time. Still, it was worth it because the people there always handed out full-sized candy bars. That is actually what our neighborhood was known for. Lots of older, well-off residents who all gave out the good candy. Because of that, we would always see tons of kids from nearby neighborhoods coming over to trick or treat too. My friend and I had been out for about an hour when we came across one house that stood out. There was an old white van parked in the driveway, and the house itself looked a lot older than most of the others nearby. But the lights were on inside, and there were a few Halloween decorations hanging outside, so we assumed whoever lived there was giving out candy. We walked up to the door and rang the bell. After a few seconds, a middle-aged man opened the door. He was wearing a scream mask and the full costume. At first, we thought it was pretty cool. Usually when someone went to the trouble of dressing up, it meant they took Halloween seriously and gave out better candy. We said trick or treat, and he silently handed us each something. I do not remember exactly what kind of candy it was, but I do remember what happened next. As we turned to leave, the man told us to wait. He said he had more candy for us inside, but we would have to come in and wait while he went to get it. It felt strange, but we were just 14, and the idea of getting extra candy sounded good enough at the time, so we stepped inside. The first thing we saw was an entire wall covered in Polaroid photos of kids in Halloween costumes. Before we could really say anything, the man came back around the corner, holding a camera. He told us he liked taking pictures of the kids who came by every year, because he enjoyed seeing everyone's costumes. My friend and I looked at each other, both feeling uneasy. I quickly said that we should get going because our moms were waiting for us in the car. That was not true, but it was the first excuse I could think of. The man did not respond. He just stood there staring at us through that mask, as we slowly backed toward the door. Once we were outside, we started walking down the driveway, and I could not help glancing back. He was still standing in the doorway, perfectly still watching us. We tried to shake off the weird feeling and kept going from house to house. After about half an hour, we had mostly forgotten about it, until we saw a white van parked on the street ahead of us. The moment I noticed it, I thought back to the one in that man's driveway. It looked identical. We slowed down a little, both realizing there was a chance, however small, that it was the same van. As we passed by it, the van suddenly shifted into gear and began creeping forward behind us. We tried to tell ourselves it was probably just some parents driving their kids around, which was not unusual in our neighborhood since the houses were spaced so far apart. But when we reached the next house, we saw the van park behind us again. We waited for someone to get out, but no one did. That is when we both knew it had to be the same guy from earlier. "Dude, what do we do?" my friend asked. We were only about 10 minutes away from my house at that point, so I said we should run for it. The moment we started running, the van started moving too. That confirmed it, he was following us. I looked back and saw it right behind us, closing the distance fast. There was no way we were going to outrun it if we stayed on the street. Without saying anything, we both veered off and jumped a fence into a nearby field. We sprinted across it, cutting through until we reached the back of my property. We ran inside as fast as we could and locked every door in the house. The van never showed up after that, and we never saw that man again. But I still think about it sometimes, even now. It was easily the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me, and it ended up being the last time I ever went trick-or-treating. It was Halloween night back in 2016. I was 23 then, and living alone in a small 2-story house. That year's Halloween was unlike any I had seen before. A few months prior, there had been constant talk online and in the news about people dressing up as killer clowns and scaring others, and it had gotten so much attention that it practically took over every conversation. Naturally, Halloween that year landed right in the middle of all that frenzy. I remember a lot of parents deciding to keep their kids home because of it. I did not really have much planned myself. The idea was just to hang out at home with a couple of friends, hand out candy to whoever came by, and call it a night. As the evening went on and the trick-or-treaters started to thin out, the three of us, me and my friends, who I will call Evan and Marcus for this story, began chatting about creepy Halloween stories and local legends. At one point, Marcus mentioned a haunted house that had been set up a few blocks away. He said we should check it out, claiming it was supposed to be the real deal. I thought I was a bit too old for that kind of thing, but Marcus insisted it was not just some light-hearted neighborhood setup, it was supposed to be genuinely scary. Eventually, Evan and I gave in, and the three of us decided to walk over and take a look. It was about a 5-minute walk from my place. I did not say anything, but when we arrived, I realized it was not nearly as impressive as Marcus made it sound. It honestly looked like something a group of local teens had thrown together earlier that day. We went inside anyway, and I noticed right away that it was fairly crowded. There were plenty of other people making their way through the maze of rooms. The haunted house was not particularly frightening. I got startled a few times, but nothing beyond that, until we came across 3 people dressed as clowns. I had to admit their costumes were pretty well done. You could tell they had spent a lot of time on them. What felt odd, though, was how they did not act like the others working there. Usually the actors would scare you once and then move on to the next group, but these 3 clowns kept following us through the house right until we stepped back outside. That made me uneasy, but I brushed it off and did not mention it. We walked back to my place afterward. Not long after we got there, Evan and Marcus decided to call it a night and headed home. Maybe 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. It was not unusual to get a few late-night trick-or-treaters, but by then it was around midnight. There was no chance it was a kid looking for candy, so I ignored it. A minute later, though, I heard footsteps coming from my backyard. Now I was just irritated. I figured it was some neighborhood teenagers trying to play a prank. I flicked the back porch light on and off a few times to scare them away. When I peeked out the window to check if it worked, I saw 3 people in clown costumes running off into the darkness. My stomach dropped instantly. I could not help but think about the 3 clowns from the haunted house earlier. The only way they could have found my place was if they had followed us back. I went upstairs and messaged our group chat, typing, "Guys, I think those 3 clowns from the haunted house were just in my backyard." Marcus replied right away, telling me to call the police. It seemed like the smartest thing to do, so I started dialing. I figured at worst I would file a report for trespassing. But before anyone picked up, I heard the unmistakable sound of a window shattering downstairs. My heart dropped. The call was still ringing as I locked my bedroom door and hid inside the closet. When the operator answered, I whispered that some men wearing clown masks had just broken into my house. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden, keep the door locked, and stay on the line until officers arrived. A short while later, I heard slow, heavy footsteps on the stairs. I tried to stay as quiet as possible, but I could barely control my breathing. The footsteps came closer, and just when I thought they were right outside my door, I heard the faint sound of sirens approaching from outside. Moments later, there was a rush of movement downstairs, followed by the sound of a door slamming. The police arrived shortly after and announced themselves before coming inside. I met them downstairs and explained what had happened. I told them I heard the intruders run out through the back as soon as the sirens started. They called for additional units to search the area, but those 3 clowns were never found. Since their faces were covered the whole time, there was not much the officers could do to identify them. The only damage was my broken kitchen window. Nothing was missing, which honestly made it worse, because that meant whoever those people were, they had not come to steal anything. Their intentions were something else entirely. Why they chose to follow me home, though I still cannot figure out.